Hi there, thank you for joining us. My name is Hussein Hiari, and in today's session we're going to talk about how we can incorporate file upload using GridFS in main stack application. I'm in the middle of writing a blog post about it, and I tended to do a video recording of the thing in order to be more interactive and more comprehensive, because sometimes blog posts can be really suck at explaining stuff. Okay, so I have created yesterday a new repository over my GitHub account, and it's under the name of file upload NodeJS. And I made sure to use some kind of the new technologies. I used Yarn from my package management, and I worked also with somehow ES6. And also I use Mongo's GridFS streams. And now, before much talking, we go directly to the code. So I will navigate directly to my working directory, blog, under upload demo. Then I'm going to open it using Atom. It's like my favorite code editor of all time. And then we're simply going to navigate to the code and see how we can do such thing using Mongo's and Node.js, MongoDB, GridFS streams, and everything and beyond. And also writing a small application and testing it using Postman. So before everything right up, file upload is really essential for our needs. Maybe for our image upload, file upload, who knows? But incorporating such thing or such functionality is really important. And for us developers, or for me, I worked on a project for this client, and I was like really suffering from such thing. And knowing how to manage everything from end to end is really essential to me. Waiting for Atom to load. Okay, so we are up in business. Okay, so let's start decomposing the application from the start card. So I made sure to install all my dependencies using Yarn, because it's really fast, and comparable with npm, because it uses like some kind of parallel download for its dependencies. But who cares? Now let's talk about more the code. So I'm fan of really modular code, and it's the case here in our mini application. So what I have done here is I made or decompose every kind of functionalities in order to have a clean code for all my needs. So I've simply got my app. I'm using Express. Then I also created some kind of config file. Then I I import the Express configuration, which we're going to see in just a minute, and also Mongoose for our and Mongoose is simply a MongoDB ORM using for our needs. It's really cool dependency for our data schemas and everything and beyond. And simply going to listen on a port defined in the config file. So now let's see how we can see the config file. Okay, so in any environment or any working, we do have in fact a dev working place and a production working place. So for me, because I'm here in a development mode, I simply create an object called dev. Then simply put it a port. I'm simply going to listen to the one in the process. If nothing there, I'm simply going to listen over port 3000, and it's the case for the DB. I'm simply going to listen to the DB link. If I don't have any, I'm simply going to use MongoDB local database. I can use everything from MongoLab and everything beyond later on in our hosting. And for the production, I don't have any production ready environment, so I was simply going to put it in a development way. Decomposing code like this will make your application more comprehensible and more testable, and also make other developers appreciate the way you write code, because everything will be like much clearer for the eye of the beholder. Now let's go directly to our Express configuration. I'm simply going to use we won't going to use body parser in here. I'm simply going to delete it. Going to do like so. Okay. Now I'm simply going to delete also this thing. Okay. Okay. So here, let me explain a bit the code. I'm simply going to use Morgan. Morgan is simply like it's a logger HTTP middleware used for our HTTP logs. So in order to see the incoming requests from any kind of users. And also I'm using this special middleware, go with the name of busboy body parser. And busboy body parser simply we're going to add the files object to our request, to our express request object, then express, and simply going to use the path. The path simply going to require some kind of static files. I don't have that thing yet. Now I'm simply going to export everything, so that we're going to explain why I do the require thing, and simply going to use the app. And in here I'm simply going to after second thought, I'm not going to use the express. I don't need to use express. Now in here, I'm going simply to configure some middlewares. I'm going to use the bus body parser, and I'm going to limit the file uploads to 5 megabytes. And also I'm going to use the logger, which is Morgan, in dev mode. Also I'm going to use or add some kind of headers in order to allow the cross origin of the cores to my application. And then I'm going simply to require some kind of routings, and I'm going to put it in a subroute under the /API routes. Now when we talk about routes, we're simply going to talk about GET request, PUT request, and everything beyond. But before that, let's check the Mongo's configuration. I'm simply going to require Mongo's in here, and then I'm going to use the DB, which is going to represent my DP link connection or connection strings for SQL users. Then I'm going to connect, and also to listen to everything in beyond, from connected events or disconnected. Okay. So far so good. Now let's go directly to my or to the main part where we are going to see our routings. Okay, so here's when the things got a bit interesting. Now I started with requiring a router, so in order to create some kind of express subrouting or express sub sites, if you wish. Then I'm going also to require the config file because I'm going to need it. Then I'm going to require also Mongoose, and also I'm going to require the file system or the FS module, which comes bundled with the NodeJS installation. Then I'm going to install or to require a special kind of modules called the GridFS stream. The GridFS stream will help us to work with the MongoDB GridFS system, and the GridFS system in MongoDB is somehow the file management system for its needs, because it's going to take out everything from chunking code to composing them and spreading them everywhere, because sometimes we are not going to simply have files statically in one place. MongoDB is going to chunk them and minimize its code and decompose everything in that file and have some kind of ID based functionalities in order to compose them later on. You can write or read more there in the GridFS subroute in MongoDB sites. Also, in order to make this work, we need to make the GridFS stream connect to our DB, and in order to do so, we need Mongoose to do so, because I'm using Mongoose in order to connect to my database, in order to do everything that database related functionalities. And since I'm connecting already with Mongoose, I was simply going to call the connection object. Then I'm going to say that grid, or my object in here, the grid.mongo, which represents the MongoDB or the database, will be the mongoose.mongo. So it's the database in general. Then I'm going to configure or need or declare a variable called the GFS. Then once I'm connecting to my database, which happened right away after my application going to launch, I'm going simply to listen to the open event. Then I'm going to connect directly to my DB using the connection db. Okay, so it's like Mongo's thing when you can get the DB reference, get the connection reference, and everything and beyond. Okay, once we do that, we're simply going to start creating our routes. I will do everything that is GridFS related inside the connection.once or the open event. Now I made a simple request, which is the router.get with slash. So it's going to be like I present later on, it's going to be the API.slash or the API slash route. And once I do that, I will simply going to have hello Hussein. So Hussein, it's like my name. Now let's test this out using NodeMon app. Now the application we're going to launch. Also, I'm going to need to launch MongoDB in the background using MongoDB in order to connect. Now I got my connection ready. Then I will wait for MongoDB application or for my application to connect. Now I'm listening on the port 3000 and also connected to the 100.0.0.1 with a DB name called test GridFS. Okay. Now simply I'm going to use Postman for my needs because I don't want to create any kind of static file from index.html or something like so. And also going to test the slash. So let's test that everything is okay for the moment. Say send, it's not a post, it's going to be get, send, and I got hello Hussein. So now we made sure that everything or our API is alive. And like I present or like I showed earlier on, I'm using Morgan. So I'm going to log everything or log every kind of incoming HTTP request. Okay. Now let's move to the more fun part or move to the fun part. Now we're certainly going to send a file. So sending file is simply going to be a post. So it's going to be represented in a post manner or in a put if you want to do update or something like so. But now I want to send a post or send an image. So sending an image will be a post in a post request. And since I'm using the busbar in my Express configuration, we're simply going to have the files object and then the file sub-object. So you might wonder, well, where this file without an S come from? Simply, it's going to represent the sending file. And in here, if I wanted to send file, I will show it later on in my in this tutorial. We'll show how we can use the file object and where it comes from. Now let's talk another thing. Since we are using the GridFS stream, we're simply going to work with chunk of bytes. So it's going to be streams, and we got like streams goes and forth and everything beyond. So now what we are doing is to configure a stream. So configuring a stream using the GridFS write or create write stream. And this object have or need a file name. So the file name will be represented in the part.name, which is going to represent our file name. I'm going to prefix it with an image underscore prefix. Also, I'm going to use the mode. It's going to be W as write. You don't need to configure this because it comes outside of the box, or it's the default configuration. Also, the content type, which is going to be represent my content type. Okay. Now, I will simply say write stream, my object, write my part.data. So the data here will represent my bytes or the chunk of bytes that the file is represented on. Okay? And everything here will be presented or given using the busbar. So if we don't need or we don't use the busbar, such thing would be like very hard to emulate. Especially there is some kind of tools that present the multer, and I'm not great fan of it. I want to keep everything clean and everything in a good way presented. Then I was simply going to listen to the close event. So when the file writing process ends, I'm simply going to return a 200 response. So okay, I'm also going to send a message with a success. Also, I'm going to send the file. So the file here will be like the file metadata after we send the file. Okay. Now I will send. Also, before that, I'm going to say and for closing my stream. And when I do this, so I'm going to get a message with a success object on it and the file metadata. Okay. Now let's test that out. Simply going to go to my img with a post request, and now in the body I'm going to have the following. Let me remove that. I'm going simply to emulate the following. So file here will be my input, or like the given metadata in our inputs or in our HTML inputs. It's going to be the name. And here value, I won't have any values because it's not going to be a text, but rather going to be a file. So now I was simply going to look for a file. Lots of tacos, bees. Okay, I'm going to send this image. Be careful because such image we're going to be like later on presented. So I'm going to send this image. I will say over here. Then I'm going to have its name and everything beyond. I will simply going to hit the send. Once I'm doing so, I was simply going to have directly this message with a content of success. Then I'm going to have my file metadata. So now, because we are using MongoDB, I was certainly going to have an ID object. It's an ID or object ID generated. And then the file name is going to represent my file name or the file that I have created in my database with the length, so the file length, the chunk size, the upload date, and the MD5 for checksum needs. Now, we certainly got my my data. So now let's see how we can retrieve it. So my file was successfully registered to my Node.js application. Now let's see how we can retrieve the file, because it's all about getting or posting the file and retrieving it back. Now let's move or get up. So when we say retrieve, certainly I'm going to talk about a GET request. So now I'm going to say the img/img name, so my file name. Then the GridFS is highly connected to my MongoDB. So I'm going to simply launch a normal Mongoose or normal search request using the find. I will simply going to give it the file name as my search query, and it's certainly going to be my request params. So it's going to be the query strings params with the img name. So it needs to be identical. Now to array, so I might get many of the same image name. Then I'm going to have an error, so the same thing with files. If I have a file.length equals to 0, simply going to send 400, file not found, or 404. Then I'm simply going to log something in here. Then here's when comes the good part. Some developers, I saw some question over Stack Overflow and stuff, they don't know how we can accumulate our data, because like I explained, the GridFS put data in chunks and spread the chunks inside my MongoDB database. So it's going to retrieve them, but when he's going to retrieve them, we're simply going to push me those bytes, and those bytes are certainly not going to be connected. Therefore, I need to put them inside an array or list or whatever you want to name it. So I was simply going to put them inside my list. Then I will inside an array in order to put them just in one place. Then I'm going to create a read stream. So the read stream is going to be the GridFS object with create read stream. I'm giving it the file names because in my own mind I have the same files. I'm going to take certainly the first one with the file name object on it as the file name. Then I'm going to listen when I start to get the data on, and then I was simply going to have chunks like I explained. Then I'm going to push my chunks inside my array. Okay, now I was then also going to listen to the end. So once the data ended, I'm going to the read stream, we're going to fire an end event. I'm going to listen to it, then I'm going to put like reformulate, because here's the thing, I'm not a fan of sending files as an IMG object. I love to send them as a base 64 because it's much lighter, and the new web will certainly going to understand how I can do such thing. So no worries, I'm going to send it directly or to encode my image as a base 64 format using the buffer data. So it's my data in here. Then after concatenating everything, because I have chunks, and chunks will be like inside cells, so we're going to concatenate every cell, and then to string are using the base 64. Then I will and prefix it with data dot 2 dots image slash png base 64 for my needs, because I simply going to put the result in a source input for my IMG or for my web application. Then I'm simply going to send it, and then I'm going to listen if there any kind of error, simply going to log that an error has occurred. So now I will take my earlier image name, I'm going to open it inside my browser. It's like localhost img slash. Now it's going to be inside the API. Okay, now what I have here is the base 64 representation of my file. Okay, now let's copy it and base one to image in order to see my image directly. So I'm simply going to put it in a decoder. Now I'm simply going to generate the image and hit generate, and ta-da! I got my image back. So it's the same image I sent earlier on, but now in a base 64 type. Okay, so it's more fun and more light to work with. Now, in order to have this project, you're simply going to go directly to my Git repo and clone this repo. And because I'm using Yarn, simply going take the cloned project and simply hit Yarn install. Or if you don't have Yarn installed on your development machine, simply hit the npm install and you are up to go. Now, thank you very much indeed for watching us, and I guess I will meet you in the next one. Peace.